Hi everyone, thank you for joining us today. We are going to go ahead and get started. I appreciate you guys helping us out with the audio test earlier. So hopefully you guys are hearing everything okay now. We'll do a quick test in a minute or so. But again, thank you for joining us for our webinar today about customizing comments. I'm really excited to present this webinar with Chris Shattuck from buildamodule.com. So we'll do a quick intro in a minute, but before we get started, I just wanted to get through a couple of housekeeping options. So to start off, regarding the audio, you guys should be hearing the audio through your speakers on your computer through the WebEx streaming. If you do need to request a dial-in number to dial into the teleconference, you can do so by clicking the request button in the WebEx window. And we do have international phone access as well. So if you do need to dial in internationally, go ahead and check out the support.webex URL on the slide there, and you can request international dial-in numbers. And of course, for technical support, we have US and Canada, as well as international WebEx support. So if you guys are having issues, feel free to give them a call. Also, today's webinar is being recorded. So the slides and audio recording will be posted in the next couple of days or so at the Acquia.com website. You can see the URL there that directs you to our recorded webinars section. So this is being recorded, so if you guys aren't able to stick with us for the full hour today, you can view it on demand at any time. Also, we are going to be having some time for Q&A at the end of Chris's presentation today. So just to make sure everyone is familiar and able to access the Q&A tab in the WebEx window, go ahead and submit where you are joining from today, and I can make sure that that Q&A tab is working and everyone's able to submit questions. And we will get to as many as we can at the end of the presentation. Thank you guys for chiming in. And I do see there's a few coming in. We have a bunch from the South. We have a bunch from Europe, London. Awesome. A couple of Canadians with us as well. Awesome. Thank you guys very much. Looks like we have a great crew with us today, so I appreciate you letting us know where you are dialing in from. Also, wanted to give you guys a heads up, since you are on an Acquia webinar right now, there's a couple other ones coming up that may be of interest to you. So there's a couple examples on the slide here. On the 18th, which is tomorrow, we are having a case study webinar around building the bassmaster.com site with OpenPublish on the Acquia Cloud. So that's along with one of our partners, Phase 2 Technology, along with Brian House here, our VP of Marketing. So that is tomorrow at 1. And next week, we are presenting Communities in the Cloud, how social as a service addresses IT challenges. And this is a webinar we are doing in conjunction with a gentleman by the name of Jeff Kaplan, who's a cloud infrastructure expert. So we're excited to deliver that one to you guys as well. So if you guys are interested in other events, check out acquia.com/webinars, and you can see what other webinars we have upcoming that will be of interest to you. All right, we also have Acquia training events. You see the URL down there, training.acquia.com. Definitely feel free to check it out if you guys are interested in Drupal training. We have training content from everywhere from Drupal in a day, site building with Drupal. We have courses around Drupal Commons, around building community sites. And as you can see, scrolling through the slides here, we have them all over the world, United States and Canada, along with Europe, Australia. So check out the Acquia site at training.acquia.com/events, and you can check out what training events we have in your area. Also, do you love working with Drupal? If so, Acquia is hiring in the US and Europe. So definitely check out acquia.com/careers, and you can see all the current openings we have available. For example, on the slide, I put a couple of departments that I know we have open recs for in engineering and design, client advisors and consulting, along with sales and marketing. So pretty much any role, if you have Drupal experience and are passionate about it, check out our website and you can get some information about what it's like to work for Acquia and what open positions may be a fit for you. Also, feel free to connect during the event and after the event today. You see the hashtag #Acquia. Feel free to go ahead and use that as you guys are on the webinar today and after. You can also follow us at Acquia and Acquia Commons. And like us on Facebook. We do oftentimes have promotions. We post pictures of Drupal events and a whole bunch of fun stuff on Facebook. So definitely check us out and like us on Facebook as well. And with that, I will go ahead and just do a quick introduction. Joining us today, we have Chris Shattuck. He is the founder of buildamodule.com, and I'm excited to have him join us today to talk about customizing Commons. So as you guys know, Commons is Acquia's distribution of Drupal designed to build community sites. And we get a lot of questions around extending Commons for certain requirements. So I'm excited to have Chris join us today to show you guys some of the common issues that come up around customizing Commons. And with that, Chris, you can go ahead and take it away.
All right, thanks a lot. Can you hear me okay?
We sure can.
Okay. And are you seeing my screen yet?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. Let's see. Share. Sorry about this, guys. I'm still getting a sense of how WebEx works. Okay, are we there?
There we go.
Excellent.
Yep, looks like it's, yep, there we go.
Okay, cool. So first of all, thank you for the introduction, Amanda. You have a very smooth presence, and it feels like it helps ground the presentation. Thank you. And also thank you, Acquia, for providing this platform. This is really cool. It's great to see how many people are interested in this, and I think a lot of that has to do with being able to see people working with Drupal hands-on, being able to kind of look over the shoulder of somebody who kind of knows what they're doing. You can learn a lot that way, and that's actually a big focus for me. As Amanda said, I work on buildamodule.com. That's what I've been doing full-time for a while. I record video tutorials about Drupal, covering everything from site building to theme development to just development, module development. There's a ton of material there, and it's got a great interface for learning. So even though there's a lot of material, you can keep track of what you've learned already, and you can also search within videos. All of the videos are being transcribed, so you can, for example, take a look at a video and read exactly what's going to be covered, or do a search within the videos themselves to find exactly what you're looking for. So like I said, a ton of free material. Feel free to take a look. If you're really trying to get up that Drupal learning curve, this can be an incredible first or useful step for you. Okay, so on to the presentation. So what we're going to do here is...
Chris,
yeah.
Yeah, Chris, I'm sorry to interrupt. It sounds like your mic is breaking up a little bit. We hear you for the most part, but can you check your connection real quick?
Sure. Sorry about that, guys. Let me just make
sure.
No,
it's no problem. I heard a little bit of breaking up, and I got a couple of chats here, so I just wanted to make sure we were, before you get into it.
Okay, so this is, I just turned off something that might have been taking up some processing power. Is it still breaking up for you?
So far, so good. Let's try that.
Okay, just let me know, and I'll switch over to a different mic if something happens.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Okay, so what we're going to be doing is tackling 5 different customizations to Commons. These are all practical customizations, things that people have requested in the Commons forums. So the first step to kind of understanding what we're going to be doing is understanding that Commons is a Drupal distribution. And this also helps in the sense that as you learn techniques to work within Commons, then you also are learning techniques to work with other Drupal distributions as well, and also with a certain stack of modules and techniques with Drupal, even if it's not a distribution. So I just wanted to say that so you know that what we cover here isn't just for Commons, but it's for Drupal in general. Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. The first thing we're going to do is change the term groups to be interests throughout these sites. So there's going to be 3 different places where we're going to change it. The first is on the groups homepage. We're going to change the title to interests. The second is in a sidebar that says most active groups, and we're going to change that to most active interests. And then in the menu, we're going to change groups as you hover over the community dropdown to interests. And there's actually 3 different places, 3 different tools that we're going to use to do all of those. The next thing we're going to do is hide a bit of text that shows in the upper right-hand corner for users that aren't logged in, anonymous users. And the use case here is that sometimes you'll have a common site where you'll have a public-facing area and a private area. And you kind of want to disconnect the two. How has the sound been, guys? Are we good?
We had a little bit of breaking up, but it's been better than it was before.
Okay. I'm so sorry. We tested this out yesterday.
We did, and it sounded fine, but I say go ahead. If I lose you, if we lose a point, I'll let you know.
Okay, thanks a lot. Okay, so in the second bit, we're going to be hiding an element. In the third customization, we're going to take the listing of documents that shows up on the documents page and change it from sorting from newest to oldest to alphabetically by document title, so from A to Z. The next thing we're going to do is take the featured list of groups on the home page, and by default it shows 3. We're going to change it to show just 1, like one featured group, and then we're going to add a pager to the bottom. And the last thing we're going to do is come back to the home page and hide some of the content that shows up at the top by default in Commons, and add a new custom block, albeit a little bit contrived, just to welcome people to our site. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump in and begin doing these on a live Commons site. So I'm going to jump to a browser where I have installed Commons. This is just default Commons, but I've run a tool to be able to add some dummy users and content using the devel generate module. If you haven't used the devel module, devel is short for development, it can be a useful tool when you're playing with a site and troubleshooting it. Okay, so our first step is modifying some text. Where we're going to do that first is on the groups homepage. So I'm going to hover over community here and click on groups. That'll take us to the groups page, and you see the title right here. And the way that we're going to modify this is by using a module called string overrides. And I'm going to walk through the steps of using it, and then we're going to take a step back and talk about why the module works. So I've already downloaded the module, but let me go ahead and open up a new tab in the browser, and I'm going to do a search for string overrides so you can see the page. So string overrides Drupal. And I'm clicking on the topmost link here. And this will take us to the string overrides page on drupal.org/project/string overrides. And you can learn a little bit more about it here. The interface is actually pretty simple. So what I'm going to do first is install it by going to, in the sidebar, administer, site building, and then modules. And it'll take just a minute to load up all of the modules and Commons. I'm going to use a browser search in order to find the string overrides module. Because there's a whole list, it can take a while to work through that list and find exactly what you're looking for. So I'm going to open up search by pressing Control F, and I'm going to search for string overrides. Okay, and it shows up right here. I'm going to check the checkbox next to it, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and click Save Configuration in order to install it. And this will take just a minute. So one of the big sort of initial hurdles when you install a module is trying to find out where the administrative pages are. In the administrative menu on the sidebar, there's a lot of groupings, and it's not always clear where something's going to be, if it's going to be in site building or site configuration. So I wanted to show you one thing that I do in order to find the location of an administrative page when I'm not quite sure exactly where it is. And it'll take just a minute to install this module. You know, it's always just a bit slower to work on your local machine than on a remote machine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and begin loading up the administrative page here by going to Administer. So I'm just clicking on Administer here. And that takes us to the top level of the administration menu. And if we click it one more time, we'll go to the main administrative page. And this will list all of the admin pages on the site. And from here, it'll take just a minute, we can use the browser search again in order to search for the name of the module or a keyword that we know is associated with the module. So I'm going to search for string overrides again. And sure enough, we see it right here. I'm going to go ahead and click that to bring up the interface. And you can see the interface is pretty simple. We have the original text here on the left-hand side and what we want to replace it with on the right. And so what I'm going to do is go back to the group's homepage here, and I'm going to copy the text that we want to change verbatim, because the capitalization and punctuation of the text matters when it comes to overriding it with this module. I'm going to jump back to the string overrides page. I'm going to paste in groups in the original, and then put in interests for the replacement. And I'm going to click Save Configuration. Once that loads up, I'm going to refresh the group's homepage. And you'll see when it does that we now have interests as the title and interests in the browser title as well. So what's happening here is that modules are built to be translatable into other languages. And if you look at the code for what's kind of behind the scenes for these interfaces, you'll see that text is wrapped in a function called T, and that's short for translate. What string overrides does is plug into this to allow you to override any bit of text that's defined this way with some other text, even if it's not in another language. So any place groups shows up in the code and it's wrapped around with that T, it will be replaced now with the word interests. And you can see as we hover over the menu here, this is still called groups, so it's clear that this isn't changing everywhere where the word groups is used. So we're going to look at a couple other places where you can change this text. With this sidebar here, this was the second thing we were going to change. Most active groups we're going to change to most active interests. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this because one way that we can change this text is through the string overrides module, but there's another way too. Let's go ahead and begin by using string overrides. So I'm going to jump back to the string overrides page and I'm going to paste in the text. And then inside of the replacement, I'm going to replace it with most active interests. And then I'm going to click Save Configuration. Okay, and I'm going to jump back to the group's homepage and refresh it. You'll see when we do that this sidebar, instead of saying most active groups, now says most active interests. Okay, so we still have one more place to change it, but before we do that, I wanted to point out another way that we can modify this text. And it's important to understand that sometimes there's multiple ways so that when you're digging around trying to figure out exactly where a change is located, you know where to look. As you hover over each one of these blocks, you see a cogwheel in the upper right-hand corner. And this is a good way to figure out exactly where a block begins and where it ends, because it shows up as you hover within the block. Now, if we click on this cogwheel, we can go to the settings for the block. So I'm going ahead and doing that. That will take us to the settings page. At the top of the page is a huge set of configuration options that we can hide because we're not really looking at these at the moment by clicking Skinner block settings here. And this will take us to the main block settings. We have block-specific settings highlighted already, and we're going to change the title here. Let's go ahead and change it to Most Interesting Interests. And then I'm going to click Save Block. So the first way we changed the text was through the string overrides module. The second way is through the block configuration. It'll take just a minute to load up the page. And you see now we have most interesting interests. Okay. Now, when it comes to the menu, we can't use the string overrides module. We have to use configuration. And when I say configuration, it's kind of a loose term to explain anything that you change by going to a form, by clicking things, by dragging, anything you can do with the mouse and your keyboard, basically, outside of working with code. So in order to modify this, we need to modify a menu item. So we need to go to the menu settings page first. And we can get there by going to Administer, Site Building, this is in the sidebar, and clicking on Menus. When this page loads up, we'll see a list of the different menus available on the site. We have Admin, Development, Features, and so on. And when we're trying to figure out what menu we're working with, we can simply read the descriptive text. And if we scroll down to primary links, we'll see that this one sounds about right. A typical representation for primary links would be tabs along the top, which is exactly what we're looking at here. So let's go ahead and click on primary links. And when this loads up, we can make sure that we're working with the right menu by correlating what we see up here with what we see in the list down here. So we have Home, Dashboard, Community, and then up top we have Home, Dashboard, Community as well. So this looks good. What we want to do is find our Groups link and click Edit next to it. When this loads up, we'll see the configuration page for the menu item. And I'm going to go ahead and change Groups to Interests. I'm going to scroll down and click Save. When this is done, we'll be able to hover over this community item here at the top, and it will say Interests instead of Groups. Okay, so what we've just seen is 3 different ways to modify text, and you see that it's not necessarily straightforward. There's not just one place we can go to say, hey, every time it says Groups, let's change it to this. So it can be a little complex, but as soon as you know the general places to go, then you can begin modifying other bits of text on the site. So I wanted to stop just for a minute to see if there were any questions about this before I move on to the next example. Has the sound been okay?
The sound has been okay. It seems to be the more activity you have on your screen, I think WebEx is trying to stream both your browser and your audio at the same time, so sometimes it gets choppy.
Oh, okay.
But I think so. If you can try to navigate either before or after you speak, your highlighting doesn't seem to be affecting it, so definitely feel free to highlight as you go.
Okay.
And I think in terms of questions, we have a couple that aren't specific to this section. Do you want me to save those for the end?
Sure. Let's go ahead and try to keep the questions section specific until the end.
Okay, actually, and one just came in kind of on this topic. How about changing the text on buttons? For example, create group button.
Create group button. Yeah, good question. I haven't changed that specifically, but I would go through the same steps that I just went through. The first step would be to see if you can change it using the string overrides module. And if you can't, then seeing if there's some other place where that might be defined. And in the end, sometimes you'll need to actually, if string overrides doesn't work, and there's no configuration options at work, and for the button, chances are there won't be any configuration for that, then you may actually need to begin digging in the code to find out if that text is actually overridable, or if there's something more complex that you need to do. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and along the same topic, I'm sorry, there was just one other one that came in kind of along that same topic, is the top tabs, so the top navigation where it says Home, Dashboard, and Community.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
So changing the text here, we just changed the groups item here under Community, and with these other items, you'll follow a similar pattern. You'll go to the menu settings page and change the title there. So that was under Administer, Site Building, and Menus. Okay?
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next example. So Amanda, when you said navigating, did you mean navigating from one page to another?
Yeah, like you just dropped off when you said navigating from, and then we lost the end of that as you were transitioning pages.
Okay. All right. So there will be some gaps when I'll stop talking as I'm making transition between things. Apparently, I need a stronger computer processor. Okay.
Well, it's probably WebEx. I think WebEx has a certain bandwidth, so I think we're trying to feed it too much.
Okay. All right. So our second example here is hiding this element in the upper right-hand corner that says already a member. So I'm going to jump to a browser where I'm an anonymous user. Okay, so I've opened up Chrome, another browser where I'm not logged in, and you see this already a member login in the upper right-hand corner. Now, I know that this is a block. This is a block content, but if you didn't, how would you find out? One way is to right-click on the content and select Inspect Element. Now, this Inspect Element shows up in the Chrome browser by default, If you're using Firefox, you need to install a plugin called Firebug in order to get this. But what this will do when we click it is open up a box in the bottom of the browser, and it will point to the place where you are in the source code where you right-clicked. So this is that content that we were just right-clicking on. And if we step up and look at the containing elements, eventually we'll see one, if this is a block, we'll see one that begins where the ID begins with block dash. So this block dash commons core header login is the one that we're looking at. So we know it's a block this way. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the browser where I'm an administrative user. And I'm going to go to the blocks configuration page by going to Administer, Site Building, Blocks. Now, in a default Drupal installation, this page would normally be where you'd see where blocks are enabled or disabled. And I'm coming to this page simply to demonstrate that in Commons, things work a little bit differently. And that's because it uses a module called Context in order to manage the display of blocks. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down. And you see here a list of the areas of the page, they're called regions in Drupal, where blocks could be displayed. So the sidebars, the header, the content, and no blocks are enabled for any of them. In fact, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see all of the blocks under the disabled section. The reason for this is that if we use this interface in order to display and hide blocks, we're very limited in our options. For example, if we want to show a block in the header on one place in the site, but in the footer on another place in the site, we can't do that through this interface. A block is pegged to one region. So instead we use context. So I'm going to go to the context page by going to Administer, Site Building, Context. And when this loads up, we'll see a list of the different contexts. And I'm going to go into the interface so you can get a sense of what this is. Each item here is a context, and then these are grouped together. And so this aggregator here is a group, and this aggregator group is a context. And as you scroll down, you'll see different groups and different contexts within each group. I'm going to scroll down to a group called site-wide. I know that this is called site-wide, but if you didn't, you might need to do a little read-through all of these contexts to get a sense of which context you might be working with. In particular, I want to edit this global context. So I'm going to click Edit. And once it loads up, I'm going to scroll down. And you'll see that a context has two parts to it. It has conditions and it has reactions. So the idea here is what context allows us to do is say, if this condition is met, I want to do this thing. And in this case, what we're saying is, if we're anywhere on the site, that's the condition, we want to display this login block. That's the reaction. But we can easily use other types of contexts, like, for example, anytime we're on an admin page or admin is in the URL, for example. If in that situation we want to do something else, like show a certain breadcrumb or show another block, we can do that. What I'm going to do here is click on this blocks item below the reactions, and this will show us what blocks show up for this context. And you'll see here, under header, we have a couple items, user meta info and header login block. And this header login block, even though we didn't see exactly the name of the block, this sounds like the block that we're dealing with. So what I'm going to do is disable it by clicking on this X next to it. That removes it from the listing. And then to make sure this gets applied, I'm going to go ahead and click Save. After this loads up, I'm going to jump over to the browser where I'm an anonymous user and refresh. And when we do, we see that the block has disappeared. So this is just a quick introduction to context. We're going to come back to it in another example. But the idea here is that context is very powerful. It's responsible for a lot of where things display and where things are hidden on the site. And you'll end up coming back to it quite a bit as you kind of reconfigure the content on your site. So I'm going to stop here real quick and see if there's any questions that apply to this before I move on to the next modification.
It doesn't look like we have questions on this. We are still getting some feedback that the audio is still breaking up, however. Is there any way you could dial in on a landline?
Yes. It will take me a minute to set that up. So cue elevator music, and I'll call back in. Sorry about that, guys.
No problem. I apologize, Chris, but thank you. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. I'll be right back.
Thanks. Thank you guys for submitting through the chat whether the audio was working or not. So we'll have Chris join us in just a minute through his landline and see if that clears up the audio issues. Thank you for your patience.
Are you still there?
Hey, Chris, we can hear you.
Hey, so it just occurred to me that I actually don't have a landline. I use a VoIP service for my main line as well. So,
all right. Well, why don't we? Can you try closing some of your other applications? Maybe we can just help the bandwidth.
Yeah. Let's see here. You guys get a preview of what my desktop looks like.
And again, thank you guys for your patience. We did a dry run yesterday, but I don't think we went in as detail into the demo as he's going right now. So the bandwidth issue didn't come up.
Yeah.
So thank you guys very much.
Yes, thank you. Lesson learned. Okay, so that's everything I can close at this point. Actually, there's one more thing here. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Let's see if this helps, okay?
All right, sounds good. And we do have a few questions that have come in.
Okay.
One is trying to make sure some of these are in context here. Is there any way to list all of different contexts and what blocks are associated with them?
Right, that would be a useful thing to see. I'm going to jump back to the context page here. So here we don't necessarily see what on this main context page, we see each of the contexts, but not the group. So I'm guessing the question is, can we see this, instead of having to go into each context, can we see what blocks are associated with each item? And as far as I know, that's not something that's available by default. You have to actually go in and take a look. I think the reason is that contexts can have, they work with blocks, but they also work with a whole slew of other things. So you would end up with a pretty compressed interface here, a lot of information if you displayed it all on that page. But I can see that being really useful. If someone hasn't built a module for that, I think they should, for sure.
Okay. I think that's it on this topic. So if you want to go ahead to the next section, we can clear up any other questions at the end.
Okay. All right. So we're going to do a couple things here, and they're all going to have something to do with displays of content. So the first thing is we're going to take the list of documents that display on the documents page and change them to be listed alphabetically. And then what we're going to do is take on the home page, take the list of featured groups and minimize it to just show one item and add a pager. And we're going to use the same tool for all of these. We're going to use the views module. So I'm going to jump back to the browser. And what I'm going to do is go to the documents listing page by going to community and documents. Now on this page, we see a list of some fake documents, and you can tell that they're not listed alphabetically. We have one that starts with N, one that starts with P, and one that starts with C. In order to modify this, what we can do is hover over this list of content, and throughout the Commons site, when you see a list of content, chances are you're looking at a view, and views are created through the views module. And you can tell you're looking at a view by hovering over it, and you'll see this edit link in the upper right-hand corner. When you click on this, you'll go to the configuration page for the view. And if you haven't seen this before, it's going to look a little crazy. There's a lot of material here, a lot of things you can do with this list. And what we're going to do here is just modify the sort criteria. On the left-hand side, we have a list of displays. Now for every view, it can have multiple displays. So we're dealing right now with a document listing, and that's one view. But we might want to show documents in a sidebar, for example, as a list. We might want to show it in the form that we just saw, which was kind of a teaser list. And we can have all of these be part of one view because they share some attributes, right? They're all documents. Maybe they're all going to be listed the same way. But it's important to understand this so that when you modify one display in a view, you don't inadvertently affect all of the other displays. So I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. So we're on the page display here, and what we want to do is change the sort criteria, which is in the upper right-hand corner. The first thing we need to do is remove the post date. So I'm going to click on this node post date, and that will load up some configuration before underneath what we were just looking at. Now, in order to make sure that we're just affecting this display and not all of the displays for this view, we need to click on the override button. Once that's done, you can go ahead and remove it safely. So I'm going to click remove. And now we see we just have this one sort criteria, search score. And we can go ahead and leave that in because that has to do with what happens when this content is filtered rather than the initial display. So our next step is adding a new sort criteria. So I'm going to go ahead and click on add and scroll down. And you'll see here that we have a really long list of potential ways to sort. And we can narrow this down by selecting from this drop-down box node because we're going to be sorting by node title. And you see right here we have node title. So before we add this, I wanted to point out one inadvertent effect of one of our previous customizations, which was that we changed the word groups to display as interests. And so that changes it in all of the places in the interface where groups is used in particular. And you see right here, we now have this saying interest, whereas normally it would say groups. So this is one side effect that's, you have to keep in mind as you use the string overrides module that you may be changing text in places where you didn't intend them to, and that might have strange effect. Like in this case, interest doesn't really make any sense. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave it. I'm going to go ahead and click add to add our sort criteria. And then I'm going to select sort ascending and click update. And now if you look at the preview down below, this is a preview of our list, you'll see that it's still not listed alphabetically. And so if you run into this issue, chances are that you're looking at a preview for the wrong display. So here's a list of displays, and we're looking at defaults right now, but we actually want to look at page. So I'm going to select page, and then I'm going to click preview. And that will refresh the display to show it in alphabetical order, just like we changed it. So now it goes from C to D to I. I'm going to go ahead and scroll up, and in order to make these final, I need to click save. So I'm clicking save. And because we clicked that edit link initially on the document page, it will take us back to that page when we're done making our modifications. It'll take just a second here, or two. Okay, and now when we look at this list of documents, we see it listed from C to D to I. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next example here because it also uses views. So this next step is to change the featured listings to display only one item and add a pager. So I'm going to jump back to the home page by clicking home in the navigation bar. And here we have our list of featured groups. Now when we hover over it, we see this edit link in the upper right-hand corner, but we also see another one here down below. And if you look down, we see even more. So what's happening here? Well, we have one view that's for this entire area, but then in each item in this view, we have another view embedded. So here's one view, here's another view, and here's another view. And we just want to make sure that when we hit that edit link, that we're editing the correct view. So here it is. Okay. This will look a little bit familiar, if a bit crazy. Again, our displays are here on this side. And we're going to change this items to display. I'm going to go ahead and click 3. And again, we want to make sure that we're just overriding this display. So I'm going to click override. And I'm going to change the number of items to 1. And then click update. And then, okay, so if we scroll down, we'll see a display of the preview, but it doesn't look right. And it's for the same reason that it didn't look right before. We're looking at the wrong display. So I'm going to go ahead and click the groups display and click preview. And here we go. It looks good. All right. I'm going to go ahead and add a pager by clicking on this use pager item and selecting full pager. And I'm going to click update. I'm going to scroll down to look at the preview. And you see we now have our pager down below the content. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click save to make it final and jump back to the featured listings page. It'll take a minute. And when it does, we'll see the one group here along with the pager down below. Okay. We have one more customization to make, so I'm going to jump back to the slides. We're going to change the homepage content. So instead of showing the default block on the top, we're going to replace it with a custom block. And this is a two-step process. Our first step is creating a new block, and our second step is adding that block and hiding the initial block at the same time. And we're going to use context for this as well. I'm going to jump back to the browser. And I'm going to go to the blocks configuration page by going to Administer, Site Building, and Blocks. This will take just a minute. The blocks page is notoriously slow, especially when there are a ton of blocks for a site. And Commons includes a number of blocks. If you scroll down, you can see them all. So we're back on this page because even though it's not very useful for us for editing the display of blocks, we can add a new block by clicking on one of these tabs under the blocks title. Now you see we have add block and add box. Blocks are the default block inside of Drupal. It comes with Drupal. But boxes are an add-on, a module that is kind of like a souped up block. It allows you to do some things that blocks can't do. So let's go ahead and add block. Or add box. Typically when you have the option, you're going to choose for a box rather than a block. Okay, I'm going to add a quick description here. I'll call it welcome block. For the title, we'll just say welcome with some exclamation marks to make it sound very enthusiastic. And we'll put that in the text as well. And then it asks for a machine name. And this is the thing that distinguishes boxes from blocks. It's all lowercase, numbers, and underscores only. So I'm going to say welcome block with an underscore. And then I'm going to click save. Okay, so we have our block now. When this gets done loading, we can then go to context. And I'm going to go ahead and click on context in a new tab here. Load it up. Take just a minute. And we're going to do the same thing that we did before when we hid the block in the upper right-hand corner. We're going to hide the initial block, and we're going to add in our new one. The context in this case, before we worked with a global context, this context is going to be the homepage context. So I'm going to scroll down until I see home. It's a group called home, and then the home context is under that group. And I'm going to go ahead and click edit next to it. Okay, I'm going to scroll down. Again, we have our conditions and our reactions, and I'm going to go ahead and click blocks. And just to make sure we have the right context, we can correlate the home page with what we see here in the blocks. So in the sidebar, do we see join and learn more, latest featured content, and most active interests? And if we went back to the home page, we would see that we do. If we scroll down, we'll see that there's this homepage commons information under content top. And this is the block that we want to hide. Just for convenience, I'm going to add our block first so we know that we're working with the right region. So here in this sidebar, we see a list of blocks that aren't enabled yet. And under boxes, we see welcome block. I'm going to go ahead and click this checkbox in order to select it. And then I'm going to click add next to the region where I want to add this block. Now you see it right here. And I'm going to remove the initial one by clicking the X next to it. I'm going to go ahead and click save to make it final. And then we're going to go to the home page. I'm just opening up a new tab and clicking on home. And when it refreshes, we'll see that the block at the top has now been replaced with our not so cool, but it's a good start block welcoming people to our site. Okay, so I think that's about time. We covered a huge amount of information, actually. So give yourself a pat on the back if you were able to follow along. We covered context, we covered views, and those two tools in combination can help you achieve a lot in terms of customizing the layout and the content on your site. So, but they're also very powerful. So as you get into the configuration of them, you may find that there's you might feel like things are going over your head for a while, and that's okay. It just takes a while to get used to it. But they're very powerful, and you'll find that they're useful. Okay, so I guess we have some time, hopefully, for some questions.
We sure do. Thank you very much, Chris. You're right, that was a lot of information. So just a reminder to folks, this is being recorded, so this will be posted online. Hopefully we'll be able to clean up some of the audio sporadic issues as well, so that if there were anything, especially in the beginning, that you missed, we can review that on demand on the Acquia website. And just a reminder to folks to submit your questions through the Q&A tab in the WebEx window in the lower right-hand corner. And that being said, we already have a few queued up here. There have been a few questions coming in. So Chris, I will start off with a topic you didn't cover, but maybe you can help out. The question is, if I want to allow login or sign up through social networks like Facebook or Twitter or Google, which module would you suggest that goes best with Commons?
Well, I actually haven't implemented that myself. I know that, Amanda, you might be more familiar with this because it's kind of on the Acquia side of things. There's a great a module that allows you to log in through a huge number of networks. Do you know offhand what the name of that is, Amanda?
I don't off the top of my head, but we'll make sure that we get back to you offline with an answer to that. The other place, just for everyone on the webinar that you can check out for some more information is commons.acquia.com. It is the Commons active developer user community. So there are a lot of questions submitted and answered in the commons.acquia.com community. And that's actually, Chris, I believe that's where you pulled a lot of your questions for your content today in terms of what the top 5 common questions were, was out of that user community there. So we will definitely follow up with you directly, but feel free to check out that site as well for answers to your questions or other information around Commons. Okay.
Yeah, I found that really useful, especially for getting a sense of, like, people post answers to their own questions as they resolve them too.
Right, absolutely. So next on the list here, we have a question regarding, was the first string that you changed coming from a module? Is that the reason you had to use string override? I'm wondering if it was part of the content that users defined or not.
Right. Okay, good question. Yeah, it came straight from a module. So you could dig into the code and you would see at some point you would find the word groups with a capital G in quotation marks inside of a function called T, wrapped in parentheses. So if you're doing a search and you're trying to find out, this is important to understand if you're having a really hard time overwriting some text. If if you're looking for its source inside of code, you can use that pattern. It's usually single quotes and it's in brackets inside of a T function. You can use that in order to search for that particular text. So yeah, they came from a module rather than from configuration, from something user defined.
Okay. Along kind of the same lines, can you use a context to hide blocks in a specific group? For example, if calendars are enabled but a group has no events, can you hide that block via context?
So the quick answer is yes, probably. And the question has to do with whether you can, so enabling it for just a particular group or for particular groups, that's fairly trivial with context. But if you're hiding it based on the content inside of it, so it was if there's no events in the calendar, don't show the calendar block, right? Or don't show stuff around that. Then that I'm not 100% sure of if there's a way to do that. I think there is. I'm trying to think through. There are some things you can do with views and context that might allow you to do that. But yeah, the simple answer is yes, probably. And actually walking through it, I would need to do some experimentation myself, just to see if there was a straightforward way to do it. If you're just hiding a block for a particular group, you can use the URL pattern, for example, in order to say, for these paths, we want to show this block, or we want to hide this block, or omit this block for certain paths. And that's very easy to do with context.
Gotcha. Awesome. Thanks, Chris. Next on the list, we have a question that says, I want to change the login block so it just says login and does not have the intro text already a member. Can that be done?
Yeah, my guess is that already a member is, and perhaps the login link is part of a string that's being passed through a T function, which would make it overridable through string overrides. So what you would do to find out what that text is by doing a search through the text of the code base of comments. So you can use something like grep. If you're comfortable with the command line, chances are if you're like me, the majority of you are not super comfortable with that. I use an IDE called Komodo, a development environment that allows me to easily just right-click on a folder and search through the text, and it's pretty quick. And you can use Komodo Lite, which is a free version of it, to do the same thing. And most editors, I think, will provide this kind of functionality. And you can do a search for already a member and see what that text is that's inside of that T function. If you can find that text, then you can copy it, paste into string overrides for the source, and then add in what you want. In this case, it's just going to be the login link as the as the replacement. Another alternative is that because you're dealing with a block, and this might actually be simpler if the string overrides isn't easy, is just adding your own block that says login. You saw how we added a box, a custom box with that for that welcome area on the homepage. We'll just create one that says login and then add that to the context and remove the previous block that existed there. Hopefully that helps.
Great. It seems to, and we're definitely getting a bunch of questions. So thank you guys for submitting your questions here. We're going to get through as many as we can in the next 4 minutes. I also did get a couple folks asking what that URL was again for our user community, which is commons.acquia.com. So definitely check that out, and I just posted that in the chat box as well. So moving on, next question for you, Chris. This is a little, I don't think you covered this, but see if you have help with this question. Is it possible to increase the space or gap between the successive nodes shown in the stored list? They look kind of tight together. Maybe using CSS override or using the view?
Oh yeah, definitely. So let me go ahead and open up So am I right that it was talking about the documents page? It doesn't really matter. We can use any as an example, but.
Right.
Was it the documents page?
The question didn't specify, but to your point, I don't know if it matters.
Okay. So yeah, you'd want to do this with CSS. Now, you guys might have noticed, especially if you've looked at some of the other distributions, that Commons is pretty drab. That's kind of a negative way to say it, but it's gray. There's not a whole lot of formatting, and the reason is that it's really meant to be a wireframe. So it's meant so that people can overlay their own look and feel on top of it. And so you see like some of the niceties, like the titles here are the same size as the text. And normally you really wouldn't want that. It's kind of hard to see. And like you mentioned, the spacing between the two is kind of rough. So yeah, CSS would be a great way to do this. You can do it through configuration if you use a module called CSS Injector. And you can add CSS to particular pages pretty easily without having to deal with any files. The long-term way to make the adjustment is through adding a local CSS file to a theme, by adding a sub-theme or cloning a theme, and creating your own look and feel and modifying the CSS style there. So if I right-click on this chunk, just to show you exactly how you do this, I'm going to click Inspect Element. You can see here, it's pretty deep. We have a lot of divs. And if we roll up, we see that there's an li div, a list element. And when we hover over it, you see kind of where the bounds of this li with this list item ends. And you can see there's a yellow border towards the bottom, and that's the padding. And you can simply expand this by adding some padding to it. And if you're using Firebug, you can see here in the lower right-hand corner, you can see where this margin is being defined. So it's margin, not padding. And it's for this view content, item list, li views row. So you can copy this and paste it into your CSS injector rule, for example, and change margin bottom to be, say, 30 pixels or 35 pixels. So hopefully that points you in the right direction. If you haven't worked with CSS before, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but you'll get it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. And just to follow up on that, to Chris's point about the themes with Commons, the theme that Chris is using right now is our base theme. And to his point, we did specifically design it for folks who really wanted more flexibility in designing and branding Commons community to their own brand standards. So when you take a look at some of the other sites, public sites that Commons use, like GSA and Mercedes and a couple that we've mentioned before, they have strict brand requirements, and so starting with a very plain base theme can be helpful in certain times. One of the things that we did in the previous release that was released, I want to say a month or so ago, was add a couple out-of-the-box themes. So Chris, I don't know, actually, if you don't mind clicking on the Switch Theme button in your admin tool right on the left-hand side, you guys can at least see how to do it out of the box. So if you click the Connect, the top one, and hit Save, you guys can actually see what some of the other themes are that comes along with Commons. So there are two other ones that look very different than what the white base theme was. And those are specifically designed for folks who don't want to do a lot of branding or CSS themselves, but they want something that looks styled a little bit different than the base theme. So just to give you guys a little bit more info on the theming there. And we have reached the top of the hour. So Chris, I appreciate your time with us today. We do have a few more questions that we can take offline. We'll be sure to reach out to you, either someone from Acquia or Chris, to give you guys answers to your questions that we did not get to today. So thank you for your participation. Again, feel free to check out commons.acquia.com for more information about our user community there and get some additional information on that site. And Chris, I just want to personally thank you for your time today. I think it was very useful. I think you covered a lot of information today. So when this is available on demand and on the Acquia website, I'll be sure to let everybody know.
All right. Thank you, Amanda, and thank you, everybody, for coming.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
All right. Bye.